There is one company here that can effectively give you kind of live television ratings, not for everybody, but for people who have their televisions plugged into these internet connected boxes. And they show that across the three of Australia's five main channels, the ones that were showing the funeral, it accounted for somewhere around 50-60% of all viewing. And that really isn't surprising. There was a time delay here on the confirmation of the Queen's death came at about 3:30 in the morning. But by 4 a.m., there was blanket coverage across Australian television. And that continued for several days. You could see almost nothing else on television. There was a slight return to normality after that weekend. But again, last night, the coverage began very early in the morning UK time, and it continued late into the evening, long after I'd gone to bed. The level of public interest in the passing of the Queen and the events leading up to the funeral has been enormous.
What is the latest polling then saying about Australians' feelings towards the monarchy? Because there have been questions raised in the past, haven't there?
Yes, 23 years ago, there was a referendum on whether or not Australia should become a republic with an elected head of state replacing the monarch in that role. At that time, it was rejected on a 55-45 majority. And there was a sense among many of the campaigners who would like to see Australia become a republic that you would never be able to get that argument over the line as long as Queen Elizabeth II was in the role, and that the period after the passing of the Queen would be the sort of optimal period to start having that debate. Now, while there is a little bit of that going on at the moment, Australian political leaders are extremely wary of having that debate explicitly now. There is, as you say, some polling evidence that suggests where the Australian population is. One poll suggested that around 60% of Australians favour retaining the British monarch, King Charles III now, as the head of state in Australia. That support gets stronger among older Australians than younger. It's stronger among women than men. But there is broad support across all age groups and across genders. Another poll suggested support for retaining the monarchy in that position as head of state has gone up significantly since the start of this year, but in perhaps an indication of how much that could be directly related to the late Queen as opposed to the institution itself. A third poll published yesterday suggested that when the question is more specific, it's not should the British monarch be head of state in Australia, but do you support King Charles III being Australia's head of state, then support, according to this other poll, drops to 50-50. So it's very finely balanced if that poll is correct. And supporters of a republic would say, look, we're not campaigning at the moment. We're not planning to campaign until the end of the week. And after a period of intense public attention and huge media coverage and genuine emotion surrounding the death of the Queen, it would be hard to make that argument for Australia becoming a republic. But the former Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, is among those who said that she thinks in the years ahead you are going to see a debate about this, and you will see what she says would be a gradual transition. And that's something we know the current Australian Prime Minister is also broadly supportive of.
Yeah, interesting. I was just going to say that we know, we saw Anthony Albanese was amongst those who have given their condolences to the royal family, but he is known to support a transition to a republic. And interesting to hear about that polling that you talked us through there. I'm wondering what difference a royal visit to Australia would make, because there have been some rumblings that Australia would be first on the map in terms of a royal visit.
There've been some reports suggesting that the king is keen to come to Australia sooner rather than later. They haven't been confirmed. And also, when Anthony Albanese met the King in London a few days ago, he said that he did not raise that, but there was always an open invite for the King to come and to visit. The Queen visited Australia on several occasions, and indeed, as Prince of Wales, Charles has visited Australia many times too, including a period as a student. There's a slight political difficulty, potentially, around the timing, because on the one hand, any royal visit would receive huge attention and a very welcoming audience. But politically, it could be difficult if you were at the beginnings of a debate about the potential of Australia transitioning to a republic. You mentioned that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is known to be a supporter in the long run of Australia becoming a republic. When he became Prime Minister back in May, he appointed a minister for a republic, which is a fairly clear indication of the direction of travel. But every time he's been asked about it since then, he's been very clear about saying this is not the right time to have that debate. He's also effectively ruled out any question of a referendum on the issue of a republic during this term of government. Now, Australian government terms are 3 years, and so that, in theory, would rule anything out until 2025. He is already in the midst of a big domestic issue around another referendum that he wants to hold on the setting up of an Indigenous voice to Parliament. That would require a constitutional referendum, and that is probably his priority in this term. So he wants to park, I think, the Republic debate. Whether or not he can may not be in his control, but at the moment, politicians are very keen not to do anything or say anything that could be perceived as disrespectful. Australia has its own day of mourning for the Queen, a public holiday, and campaigners for a republic have said they will resume their campaigning the day after.
Okay, interesting. We will keep up to date with you. Thanks very much for joining us. That is freelance journalist Paul Osborne taking us through the thoughts in Australia on the future of the monarchy there. It is now 21 minutes past 5 this morning. You're listening to Early Breakfast with Anna Cunningham on Times Radio.